So you want an Audi Q7, but you're not sold on the slightly sedate design? Well, Audi has a solution. It's called the Q8, and this sporty looking SUV will go head to head against the BMW X6 and the GLE Coupe. And today we're in very cold but stunning Chile to see how it stacks up. This thing looks absolutely stunning in person, and while it does look small in pictures, the pictures are deceiving because it's about the same size as a Q7. It's not quite as long, but it is wider, and you do get the same wheelbase, so you get all of that legroom in the back, only being a 5-seater as well. And you get these awesome looking pillarless windows, so it really harks back to Audi's true form in that design where you get the flares at the back, and it definitely stands out when you're out on the road. But the back is the bit that I love the most. Let's have a look. How's this for design? This really, really looks cool, especially when you're following the car in traffic. That's all one LED strip. And then when you switch the car on, these banks all light up individually. And then you have the progressive indicator as well. This thing really does focus on style. We're talking here about a boot that is really generous as well. 605 litres of capacity. Then it expands to 1800 litres when you get rid of those seats. The second row also moves back and forwards to give you that extra space. And you can also get air suspension with this car, which means push of a button, it will lower the car for easier access. This isn't as high as something like an X6, so certainly a better space to be in. Now, talking about space, the rear seats, you will not believe how much legroom there is there. So what about legroom? This is where the car really excels. I have this seat quite far back, and as you can see, plenty of knee room there. I have stacks of toe room as well. It's often an issue in SUVs that want that sporty look because they'll drop the seats all the way down, but we have lots of accommodation there. Headroom's good. Slightly cramped if you are going to be taller, and then if you get a moonroof as well, that's going to eat into that space ever so slightly. But you do get creature comforts like center armrest with 2 cup holders. They come out sort of fairly geniusly. You have ISOFIX on the outboard seats, and as I mentioned before, this row slides, so that means you can get extra boot room in the back there. There is also these amazing climate controls here, so with your finger, you just slide up and down, and that adjusts the temperature. You can hear it clicking away there. 2 12-volt outlets, but no USB. I mean, in today's day and age where everyone has a device or some other thing to play with, you need to have USB, especially for a car that's brand new. Let's check out the front. The future is well and truly here. This interior looks absolutely stunning. So it's very similar to the interior from the Audi A8. So you can see that it's filtering down to the rest of these models. Ahead of the driver, you have the virtual cockpit, which can be controlled by the driver here. So you can get a full screen of nav on that screen if you want, or you've got all your driver controls there. Excellent voice recognition system. So you can speak to it naturally. You don't need to say telephone and then call Bob or something like that. You can just say, I want to call Bob, or I want to put the temperature up, and it will do all of it for you without having to take your hands off the wheel. So what have we got here? We've got 10.1 inch screen up the top and then an 8.6 inch screen down the bottom. But these are really cool because they have haptic feedback. So when I press on this, it clicks and I can feel it on my finger. It is seriously cool stuff, and then you can also slide up and down there as well. Only downside to these screens is they get fingerprints on them so easily, which is a bit of a shame, but all of your controls are there, all very easy to use, and then you have subcategories here as well for parking, cameras, and assistance systems as well. In terms of storage, there's not a great deal. So we've got 2 cup holders here, and you'll notice that with my phone, for example, I can't really sort of sit it anywhere, and this is a smaller iPhone. If you have a big one, it's not going to be able to fit anywhere. And then if you want to put it in the middle here, this is a bit of a joke, this center console, like there's no room there at all, but you do get wireless phone charging, and this is where your USB ports are sitting as well. Visibility out of the cabin is fantastic, but I want to see how this thing drives, so let's hit the road. Let's talk about engines. We don't know exactly what we'll be getting in Australia yet, but the one I'm driving here is a 3-litre turbocharged diesel, talking about 210 kilowatts of power and 600 Newton meters of torque. It's a pretty healthy dose of torque, and what you'll find is that you just lean on the throttle, it kicks down, and it just shoves you back in the seat. It is a really good match for this chassis. In terms of dimensions, the Q8 comes in at just under 5 meters long, and that means it's 66 millimeters shorter than a Q7. And inside the cabin, it doesn't really show because you don't have to accommodate for those 7 seats. And as you saw before, we have pretty decent boot room too. But the other key figure is that this car's 27 millimeters wider. It means that when you do get stuck into some corners, it can be really eventful and great fun to drive. What's taken me by surprise the most here is how quiet it is in the cabin. There is a little bit of wind noise coming in through the pillarless windows, but aside from that, we're doing 110 eye here. I can barely hear a thing. This will be the perfect car if you want whisper quiet silence on the highways. Being an Audi, there's a stack of different drive modes to choose from, 7 in fact. They include things like auto, individual, dynamic, all-road, off-road, and they all adjust the way the car responds to your input. So sometimes you'll find the throttle is a little sharper, ride will be firmer. It also depends on which setting you've chosen. And all of this tech is super easy to use. Haptic feedback on this screen down the bottom is excellent. It makes you know that you've entered a command and that it's accepted it. And the top screen's also easy to use, but the voice recognition is my favorite. Like, you can literally tell it anything and it will just go to your command. You don't need to have it in structured prompts. Under the skin here, we've got a 48 volt mild hybrid system. What does that mean? Well, 48 volts is there because it allows them to carry more power through the car, and it allows it to cater for things like your stop-start systems and also mild regeneration of power so that you can save energy. It even does cool things like if we're approaching an intersection, it will vibrate the throttle pedal. So I know that I then need to lift off and I can coast to save fuel, and I don't need to brake as hard, and I'll still arrive at that intersection in the same amount of time. So it is a very clever system, and with things like that, they're improving the fuel efficiency of these cars. Part of the reason this car handles so well is the availability of a 4-wheel steering system that allows the rear wheels to turn in a little bit as you're driving around corners. That increases the turning radius, but it gives you a better feel behind the wheel. It gives you that sporty intention when you're really getting stuck into it. Steering feel is fantastic. Even when you're traveling at highway speeds, little inputs, it's just soft and gentle. Stick it into dynamic mode and it really begins to respond to every single input you put in. The brakes are fantastic and you feel like the car's agile and nimble, which is really strange for a car that weighs about 2.1 tons. Now, find yourself a corner, stick it into dynamic mode, the suspension firms up, the steering weightens up a bit. God, this thing absolutely hammers. It's almost unrelenting, like we're just punting through this corner here, and it has no dramas at all holding on. I mean, it is remarkable for a car this size, and it shows that it isn't just a Q7. The good news is that despite this being built for on-road driving, it still is pretty capable off-road. You do have an off-road mode and also an all-road program, and they will adjust things like your brakes to make sure the car will dig in on loose surfaces and pull up the car if it needs to. And the ride's still really good on this choppy sort of off-road course they have set up for us. You can get up to 254 millimeters of ground clearance if you option the air suspension, which means you will find that you can just crawl over most things without too many dramas. And then the traction control system takes care of the rest. The ride out here is, it's simply remarkable. In the comfort setting, it's soaking over nicely. When we got picked up from the airport, just a funny side fact, we were in some old Chevy pickup van. We were getting thrown around everywhere. When we left our hotel in these cars over the same roads, I was convinced that we were on different roads because this is just gliding over everything. Even on the off-road course, it just felt just comfortable. Nothing phases it. So they've done a really good job there with the air suspension. But in saying that, we haven't tried a car with coil springs. So air suspension is generally optional in Australia, so we'll have to wait and see what the coil springs feel like back home in Oz. Right, let's talk about the negatives. And the first one that's going to irritate most people, and I can see it right now, this screen down the bottom has so many fingerprints on it. I've barely even used it, and every time I touch it, the screen just gets sullied with fingerprints. That's going to get annoying, especially if you have kids. The wind noise, it is actually quite annoying. It is windy here, and they are pillarless windows, but I reckon that's unacceptable. There should be no wind noise inside the car. They made the car so quiet. Why fail at that last hurdle? And last but not least, what is with the naming structure? 55 TFSI, 55 TDI, 40 TDI. I don't understand what it all means, and it makes no sense at all. And if you have to explain it to people, I think half the battle's lost there. What was wrong with the old system? You knew exactly how big the engines were and what it all meant. Now it is just absolutely confusing. So that's been your first look at the all-new Audi Q8. I have been seriously impressed with this car. I'm keen to see how it's going to be priced in Australia and what engines we'll have available to us. I'm also very keen to see what the rumoured RS Q8 looks like. That should be pretty awesome. But in the interim, head to caradvice.com to read up on the Audi Q8 and do let us know if you have any questions.